Welcome to Ceramic Pottery and Sculpture. In this video I want to talk about coil construction. First, let's talk about making coils. I usually start with some clay in my hand and work it into the beginning of a coil, and then down against the table and making long sweeping passes back and forth. If the coil starts to get flat like this, which it often will, simply tip it up on end, tap it back down, and continue rolling. As you're rolling your coil, think about where the coil is thick and where it's thin. Wherever it feels thick, apply a little more pressure. Where it feels thin, avoid that area. If you do end up with an area that's really thin, sometimes you can make it thick by rolling back into that area in that manner. You want to roll coils thicker than you want the wall of the pot, because you're going to use some of the clay mass to connect the coils together, so you're going to lose some thickness. I'm going to roll out a couple coils here. And there's two ways to build up a form with coils. The first one is like a snake. So you have a coil here and you are just wrapping it around and around until you build it up and up and up. There's two problems with this method. The first one is the piece looks crooked because all of the coils are going up at an angle. It looks like it's tipped over. The other problem is there's really no good way to end it. By the time you get to the top, you always end up with this leftover coil piece. So a better method is to make hoops. And if you are making a bunch of hoops and you have your clay, you can cut a whole bunch of lengths that are the same and then put them together and stack them up, securing them on the inside. And not only does this piece come up nice and square and level, it looks straight, but when you're finished, you end up with a nice finished rim at the top. So let's make a coil basket. We want to first start with a base. So I'm going to take some clay and flatten it. And I'll take my boards and my rolling pin to roll it out. Now I'll use a little shorter, make it a little thinner. If your clay wants to stick to the table, you can always work on top of newspaper or cloth. And now I'm going to cut a circle out of this. If you have a turntable, an easy way to cut a circle is to spin the slab on the turntable while you trace a circle. After you've traced the circle, then you come back and you cut your circle. If you don't have a turntable, you might be able to find something round that's the size you want and trace around that. Also, working on paper allows you to spin the piece freely. I'm going to go ahead and work on this turntable. And I'm going to add my first coil. And I overlap it slightly. And I cut through both ends of the coil at a 45-degree angle and take away the extra pieces. And then join that coil together. And I get a nice miter joint on that hoop. And this first coil, I'm going to attach it on both the inside and the outside. So to attach it on the inside, I'm going to take some of this coil and push it down into the base, all the way around. And then with this first coil, I'm going to flip this over and pull some of the base down into that first coil. And smooth that out. The rest of the coils will only get smoothed out on the inside. I construct with coils, coil by coil. So I put my next coil on here, overlap, cut through both at a 45-degree angle, take off the end pieces, attach that seam, and then I'm going to go and attach it on the inside only. I'm supporting it with my outside hand as I take a finger from the inside and take a little bit of that coil and push it down into the first coil. And once I've done that all the way around, then I'll come back and smooth it out with my finger horizontally. That ensures that those coils stick together. And I add my next coil. It's a good idea to make sure that your seams are not in the same spot as you build up on this piece. So if I have a seam here from the previous coil, then maybe the seam on this next coil will be over here, a third of the way around the pot. And again, I cut at an angle through both pieces. Take those pieces and set them aside. Join my coil together. And attach that hoop. Supporting it on the outside, pushing down, taking a little bit of that top coil and pushing it down into the coil below. I'm using my thumb on my right hand. Once I get all the way around, then I will go and smooth it out. If you want it nice and smooth on the inside, you can take a wooden rib and use that to help smooth out the inside. You can see how I support the clay from the outside with my left hand as I use the rib to smooth out the inside. pushing the clay out to my hand. If you're making a pot and you want it to go out, then set your coil out here and just make the ring bigger. And you can make the piece go out. If you want the pot to come in, set your coil on the inside, making the coil smaller, and you can make your pot go in. There are all different kinds of designs that you can do on the side of your coil pot. You can do swirls, zigzags. The best way to build using that technique is to first make what you want on the table. So if I am going to make a wave, I might mark on the table 2 lines that help guide me when making this wave so that it's the same height throughout the length of this wave. And once I've made a wave long enough to wrap all the way around the side of the pot, then I would attach it to the side of the pot. If you're doing spirals, it might not be a bad idea to measure out your clay. You want 6 or 8 spirals around the piece, so measure out 6 or 8 coils that are the same length. That way when you make a spiral out of one, it's a good chance that the next spiral is going to be about the same size. And these spirals can be connected like this around the pot, or they can be like this. So that's another thing you would think about as you make the piece. And you'll notice that these spirals have an opening at the bottom. You could leave that as a piercing in your design, or you could simply take a little triangle piece of clay, and as you're building with these, make sure that you're filling in those little gaps. Alright, I'm going to do one more coil around this piece. I can smooth it out on the inside. And to ensure that the piece is coming straight up, it's not a bad idea to use a straight edge and hold that against the outside. So about every 3-4 inches, straighten up the edge. The other thing is I can see that the top is getting a little tall over here and shorter over here. I'm going to take a flat board and set it on top here and tap it before I add my next coil. And that keeps the coils coming up nice and level. Now I want to talk about this idea of adding a handle. So here's an example of a basket with a handle. And a lot of times there might be a situation where you want to add something to your piece, but in the plastic state the clay is too soft and it would just collapse. So we're going to make this handle and then hold it in suspension over the basket while the basket dries. I'm going to take 2 coils that are about the same size as the basket, and I'm going to roll them thinner. I'm going to be putting these together. If I left them that same thickness, I think the handle would be too thick. So these coils get rolled down a little thinner. And then I put the 2 coils together and I simply spin one side while I hold on to the other. Maybe even spin this other side in the opposite direction. Now, these coils are wrapped around each other, but they're not really stuck to each other yet. So to ensure that they are stuck to each other, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap them against the table. And now they're stuck to each other, but it looks a little rough on this side. That's where I've used my fingers to push the clay down. But if I flip this over and look at this side, you can see that that actually looks pretty nice. And if I wanted to build this up into a coil pot, I could use that as one of the rows. But I'm going to use this as a handle. Now, to support the weight of the handle while the piece is drying, I'm going to take a single page of newspaper. You can use any kind of paper. And I'm going to roll up a piece of this and bend it into the shape that I want the handle. And lay this handle over the top of the paper and onto the basket. And I'll deal with each side independently. So first I'm going to work on this side. I'm going to cut the excess clay that I don't need and mark where the handle goes. Move it aside, score, add a little bit of water, put that back into place, and press it into place. Now I'll do the same thing to the other side. Cut it off to the length that I want. Mark where that is. Move it aside, score, add a little bit of water, and press it together. Now for some attention to detail, I'm going to put a little extra clay on either side and make a little button like you see on this piece here. So to do that, I first want to measure the clay out. So I have my 2 balls of clay that are about the same size. Roll them into a ball. I'm going to set it right in the middle here and press it into place. And when I take this ballpoint pen and push in those 4 dots, that really helps secure that clay as well. And I'll do the same thing over here. It goes here, presses into place. And that's just adding a little attention to detail. Now, before I walk away from this piece on the shelf, I want to look carefully to make sure that the handle has a nice curve to it, and when I turn it this way, that it's not leaning one way or the other, but it's really standing right up in the middle. And after the piece has had a chance to dry, then I'll be able to take the newspaper out. Alright, I encourage you to look at more examples of coil construction online. All kinds of things that you can do. Thank you for watching.